The Book Essence Podcast, Ep.17, The Four Agreements.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into The Four Agreements.
By Don Miguel Ruiz.
Right, by Don Miguel Ruiz, a book all about, personal freedom and happiness. And you know what's so cool? You actually sent in a summary of this book.
That's right.
And I was really struck by this whole concept of domestication.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, how much of who we are, like how much of our personality, like our beliefs, even how we see the world, how much of all that is actually like shaped by all these rules and beliefs that we've been taught since we were kids,
It's really fascinating how Ruiz describes this whole thing. He says, we're essentially living in this dream of the planet, this kind of shared dream where all these cultural norms and beliefs, they're just passed down.
Like heirlooms.
Yeah, like heirlooms, exactly, from one generation to the next.
It's like we're born into this system and we don't even realize we're being like molded by it.
Yep. And he compares it to, how we train animals.
Right.
Like with reward.
Punishments.
Punishments, yeah, that eventually shape their behavior.
Yeah.
And he's saying society does the same thing to us.
Wow.
Think about a kid who gets praised for, following the rules, being obedient, but then they get in trouble for showing certain emotions.
Ah, so that's where that inner critic comes from.
Yeah.
The what Ruiz calls the book of law.
That's
we internalize all these rules and then we start judging ourselves based on them.
Exactly. And that's like the root of so much suffering, We become our own worst enemies, constantly measuring ourselves against all these standards that might not even be helpful.
Okay, so let's dive into the first agreement. Be impeccable with your word. I mean, this idea that words have this almost magical power.
It's intense, right?
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
And what's really interesting is how Ruiz connects this power of words to the idea of black magic when it comes to things like gossip and negative self-talk, right? He's not being literal, of course. But the point is that words can have a real impact.
A lasting impact.
A lasting impact, yeah. Kind of like casting a spell almost.
He even uses that powerful example of Hitler, showing how he used words to manipulate an entire nation. It's a chilling reminder that words have consequences.
Big time. And, it's not just about what we say out loud to other people.
Oh, right.
It's also about that voice inside our own heads. Our self-talk. Our self-talk can be incredibly powerful.
So we're always putting ourselves down. Are we basically using black magic on ourselves?
You could say that.
Whoa.
But the good news is that we can also use words for good. It's about choosing to speak to ourselves with kindness, encouragement, and truth, like we would to a good friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember this one quote from the book that really, really stuck with me. He says, "The human mind is like a fertile ground where seeds are constantly being planted. The seeds are opinions, ideas, and concepts." Whoa, you have the power to choose the seeds you plant.
It's a powerful image, right?
Yeah, it really is.
We have a choice in what we feed our minds, what we allow to take root and grow there.
So for our listener, if they want to start being more impeccable with their words, what's a good first step? What can they start doing today?
Well, I think one simple thing is to start paying attention to that inner voice.
Right.
Notice those negative phrases that might just pop up automatically, and then consciously try to replace them.
More positive.
With more positive and empowering ones.
Yeah.
And remember, gossip. Gossip's like a virus,
Ooh, that's a good one.
Choose to spread kindness and positivity instead.
I love that. That's a great takeaway. Okay, let's move on to the second agreement. Don't take anything personally. This one feels so liberating.
It does, doesn't it?
But also kind of hard to actually do.
It's definitely a challenge. But the basic idea is that, what other people say and do, it's more about them and their own reality than it is about you. It's like their actions are a reflection of what's going on inside of them.
Like when Ruiz talks about someone calling you stupid,
yeah,
he says it's more about the speaker's insecurities than about, your intelligence.
Exactly. It's like they're holding up a mirror to their own inner world.
Yeah.
And we make the mistake of thinking it's about us.
So it's about developing a sort of emotional immunity
Yeah, I like that.
where we don't let those outside opinions like define our self-worth.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that you have inherent value regardless of what anyone else might say or do.
This one really hits home for me because I think we all struggle with wanting validation from others, right? It's like we're constantly looking for that approval, and when we don't get it, it can really sting.
And that's where the suffering comes in. But by not taking things personally, you kind of like break free from that need for external validation. You
Wow.
start finding that sense of worth and security from within.
Like you're stepping off that emotional roller coaster
Yeah,
and finding this place of peace and stability inside yourself.
that's a great way to think about it.
It's not easy, but I can imagine how it could be so transformative.
It really can be.
Okay, so that leads perfectly into the third agreement. Don't make assumptions.
Oh, yes.
I think we've all been there. Like those situations where assumptions have led to like huge misunderstandings
Oh, yeah.
and unnecessary drama.
Totally. Our minds, they're wired to try and fill in the gaps when information is missing. But the problem is, we often end up creating these elaborate stories,
Based on nothing.
based on very little evidence.
Yeah, he has this great example about like a friend acting distant. And we might just jump to the conclusion that, oh, they're mad at us. But in reality, they could be going through something completely unrelated, you know?
Totally. We tend to project our own fears and insecurities onto the situation without bothering to check in with the other person.
So it's all about communication then, right?
Communication is key.
Instead of assuming, we need to just like ask questions, clarify things.
Clear. Open communication is essential for healthy relationships.
Yeah.
When we express ourselves clearly and really listen to others, we could avoid a lot of unnecessary drama.
This feels like a really important takeaway for everyone listening.
Absolutely.
Think about how often we let these assumptions just fester and turn into huge problems when like a simple conversation could have cleared everything up.
Happens all the time. And it's not just about avoiding conflict. It's also about fostering, deeper understanding and connection for the people in our lives.
Okay, let's talk about the fourth agreement. Always do your best.
Okay.
This one seems pretty straightforward at first.
Yeah,
But I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
there is. There is. What's so fascinating here is that Ruiz makes this distinction between doing your best and striving for perfection.
Ah, okay.
It's not about pushing yourself to the point of burnout or, setting unrealistic expectations.
He emphasizes that what your best looks like will change from day to day,
Exactly.
depending on the circumstances.
And best will vary.
Like some days your best might be just getting out of bed,
That's okay.
and that's totally okay.
We're not robots.
Right.
We're human beings, with varying energy levels.
Moods, limitations. He gives this example of like how your best will naturally be different depending on, your health and energy levels. Like if you're feeling sick or exhausted, your best won't be the same as when you're feeling, healthy and full of energy.
Right. It's about being kind to yourself and recognizing that your best is enough, even if it's not perfect.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between striving for excellence, but also accepting our limitations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you consistently do your best without judgment or self-criticism, you create this foundation for growth and inner peace.
And he also talks about how this agreement makes the other agreements easier to follow.
It does.
Almost like it's the fuel that allows the other agreements to really work.
That's a great way to put it. When you're committed to doing your best, you're more likely to be mindful of your words,
Right.
less reactive to others, less prone to making assumptions.
It's like this positive feedback loop where one agreement reinforces the others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the real magic of the four agreements lies, in their ability to transform not just our own lives, but also the world around us.
No, the book, it goes beyond just these four agreements, right?
Right.
He also talks about this idea of breaking free from old agreements and creating what he calls a new dream.
Yes, and that's where it gets really interesting. He's essentially saying that we can rewrite the script of our lives by challenging those limiting beliefs, those beliefs that were instilled in us during childhood.
He outlines these three masteries: awareness, transformation, and intent. as a roadmap for achieving personal freedom.
Love that framework.
It's a great framework. Awareness is about recognizing those old limiting agreements that are holding you back. Transformation is about consciously choosing to replace those beliefs with ones that are more empowering, more aligned with like who you truly are. And then intent is about aligning your actions with those new beliefs. It's about walking the talk. So it's not enough to just change our thinking. We have to actually live in a way that that reflects those new beliefs.
Absolutely. It's about making choices that are consistent with the person you want to be and the life that you want to create.
He uses this really powerful image of transforming our lives from a dream of hell to a dream of heaven. It's a beautiful reminder that a more fulfilling and joyful existence is possible.
It is, and it all starts with taking responsibility for our own thoughts, beliefs, actions.
Okay, before we wrap up part one, I want to touch on one more concept that Ruiz introduces: the new dream.
Yeah.
What exactly does he mean by that?
So the new dream is essentially his vision for a world where people are, living in alignment with the four agreements.
Okay.
It's a world where, like, fear and judgment and self-rejection, those just fall away. And love, joy, and peace become the driving forces.
It sounds almost like utopian.
It does, right.
And also incredibly appealing.
And while it might seem like a lofty goal, Ruiz believes that it all starts with, individuals making a conscious effort to live in this way.
So it's not about waiting for the world to change around us. It's about, like, starting with ourselves.
Exactly. It's about each of us becoming what he calls warriors of love, spreading that love and awareness to the people around us.
Like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Where one person's transformation inspires others to start their own journey of self-discovery.
That's the beauty of it. And as more and more people embrace this way of being, the closer we get to realizing that new dream.
That's a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
Welcome back. I'm really curious to dig deeper into this whole new dream concept. It's such a powerful vision, but I think it can feel kind of abstract,
I agree.
Like how do we actually, like, bring it into our everyday lives?
Yeah, it's one thing to, understand these agreements intellectually.
Right.
But putting them into practice in everyday life is a whole other challenge.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we move from, like, theory to action?
Ruiz emphasizes that it's an ongoing journey.
Okay.
Not a destination.
Right.
It all starts with becoming aware of those moments when we're, still operating from our old limiting beliefs.
Like those ingrained patterns?
Yeah, those ingrained patterns.
Yeah.
That can be so tough to break.
It's like we need to become detectives of our own minds, like uncovering those hidden beliefs that are driving our behavior.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And once we've identified those beliefs,
Right.
we can start to question them.
Oh, okay.
Like, are they really true? Do they serve us? Or are they just like outdated scripts that we're just mindlessly following?
And that's where the second mastery comes in, right?
Yes.
Transformation.
Transformation.
It's about making a conscious choice to replace those old beliefs
Yes.
with ones that are more aligned with our true selves.
Exactly. But this is where things can get a little tricky.
How so?
Because it requires us to, step outside of our comfort zones.
Right.
Challenge our ingrained ways of thinking.
It's like we're rewiring our brains, like
Yes.
creating new pathways that support the reality we want to create.
Yeah. It's almost like we're like hacking our own operating systems.
I love that.
But remember, it takes time.
Right.
Patience and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be discouraged if you slip back into old patterns.
Right.
It's all part of the process.
He also talks about the importance of forgiving ourselves when we do mess up.
That's such a crucial piece. If we're constantly beating ourselves up for our mistakes, we're just reinforcing those old agreements of not being good enough.
So self-compassion is key here.
Absolutely. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a loved one.
Thinking about those old ingrained patterns and how to transform them makes me think about those times when I totally jump to conclusions.
Oh, yeah.
And assume the worst, which honestly happens more than I'd like to admit.
The third agreement, don't make assumptions, is all about that, isn't it?
Totally. It's so easy to, like, get caught up in our own heads.
Yeah.
And create all these stories about why someone is acting a certain way.
Totally. Like, maybe a coworker seems distant.
Right.
And you automatically assume they're annoyed with you. When in reality, they could just be, having a bad day
Right.
or dealing with something personal.
It reminds me of this time when,
Oh, you have a story.
well, I mean, not a super exciting one, but a while back I had this friend who suddenly stopped responding to my texts.
Oh, no.
And I immediately, started spiraling,
Yeah.
convinced I'd done something wrong.
Of course.
But it turned out she was just swamped with this huge work project and hadn't had a chance to check her phone.
It's so easy to let those assumptions run wild, isn't it?
It is, and it can really damage relationships. The key is to remember that we rarely have the full picture.
Right.
Instead of assuming, we need to just ask questions.
Ask questions.
Clarify things.
Communicate openly.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder. Okay, so we've got the third agreement covered.
Okay.
What about that fourth one? Always do your best.
Okay.
Where does that fit into this whole idea of transforming ourselves and creating a new dream?
It's the foundation, really.
Okay.
Remember, Ruiz emphasizes that our best will vary depending on our circumstances.
Mhm.
It's not about striving for some, unattainable standard of perfection.
He uses that example of how our energy levels will naturally fluctuate,
Right.
If you're feeling sick or exhausted, your best might simply be resting and taking care of yourself.
Exactly. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
It's about honoring your own needs and limitations.
Mm.
And when you consistently do your best, without, judgment or self-criticism, you create this sense of integrity and self-respect
Right.
that allows the other agreements to naturally fall into place.
That makes a lot of sense. So if we're working on becoming more aware of our thoughts and actions, actively challenging our old beliefs, and making a conscious effort to do our best, we're essentially embodying those three masteries that Ruiz talks about.
You got it. It's a continuous process,
Right.
of self-discovery and growth.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately how we start to shift our reality and create that new dream, both individually
Selectively
and
and
collectively. Those four agreements are the building blocks.
And those three masteries are the blueprint.
It all works together.
Yeah, it all works
They
together.
provide a framework for living a life that's more aligned with our values, our truth, and our deepest desires.
All this talk about doing our best and transforming ourselves makes me wonder about the role of forgiveness
Oh, interesting.
in this whole process.
Yes.
Because sometimes those old patterns and beliefs,
Yeah,
they're tied to past hurts that can be really hard to let go of.
you're absolutely right. Forgiveness is essential. Holding on to resentment and anger it's like carrying around a heavy weight.
Yeah.
It keeps us stuck in the past
Yeah.
and prevents us from fully embracing the present moment.
So how do we actually practice forgiveness?
Right.
Especially when we've been deeply hurt by someone.
I know.
It can feel almost impossible.
It's tough, but Ruiz reminds us that forgiveness is ultimately about releasing those negative emotions, not for the other person's sake, but for our own.
So it's not about condoning their actions or saying what they did was okay.
Not at all. It's about freeing ourselves from the pain and resentment that's keeping us captive. He uses this powerful analogy in the book.
Okay.
He compares holding on to resentment to drinking poison.
Ooh.
And expecting the other person to die.
Wow, that's a really vivid image.
Yeah.
It really highlights how holding on to anger only harms us in the end.
It does. It's not just about forgiving others.
Right.
It's also about forgiving ourselves.
Yes. We can be so hard on ourselves, holding on to guilt and shame for things we've said or done in the past.
Yeah.
It's we're carrying around all these should-haves and could-haves that just weigh us down.
And all that self-judgment, it just perpetuates those old agreements of not being good enough.
Right.
It keeps us trapped in this cycle of negativity.
So how do we even begin to forgive ourselves?
Start by acknowledging that you were doing the best you could with the knowledge and awareness that you had at that time.
It's about recognizing that we're human.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. We're all a work in progress.
Exactly. Instead of dwelling on the past, try to shift your focus to learning from those experiences.
Right.
And making different choices moving forward.
I love how Ruiz talks about the past being like a dream.
Yeah.
We can choose to keep replaying those old nightmares, or we can wake up and create a new dream.
The new dream.
One filled with love, joy, and forgiveness.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
It really highlights the the power we have to choose how we want to experience life.
You know, we've talked a lot about forgiveness on an individual level, but I'm curious, what are your thoughts on forgiveness on a larger scale?
Hmm.
Like forgiveness between groups of people who have a history of conflict or even violence, you know? Do you think that's possible?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is it depends.
Oh, okay.
It depends on so many factors, you know.
Yeah.
The context, the history, the willingness of both sides to engage in dialogue and reconciliation.
That definitely feels like a different kind of challenge.
It is.
But is it even possible to have a new dream, like a world where people are living in alignment with the four agreements?
Yeah.
If we can't find a way to forgive each other for past wrongs?
That's a really thought-provoking question.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And I think it's something worth exploring further.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can pick up that thread in part 3.
Absolutely. That's a great place to leave things for now. Welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive into the four agreements. You know, we've been talking a lot about personal transformation and creating a new dream, like, for ourselves.
Yeah.
But at the end of part 2, we started touching on something pretty big. We did.
The idea of forgiveness on a larger scale, like between groups of people who have a history of conflict, you know?
That's a really important point to bring up, because even if we master these agreements in our own lives, it's hard to ignore the fact that there's just so much pain and division
in the world
around us. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, can we really talk about creating a dream of heaven, as Ruiz calls it?
Yeah.
When there's so much suffering and injustice happening on a global level.
That's a question I've wrestled with myself.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
But what I keep coming back to is this.
Okay.
If we want to see real, lasting change in the world, it has to start with each of us.
Yeah. Taking
Taking responsibility for our own thoughts, words, and actions.
So it's like those ripple effects we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If enough people start living by these agreements,
Yeah.
maybe that can create a shift in the collective consciousness. That's the hope. And I think forgiveness is a crucial part of that shift.
Okay.
Because as long as we're holding on to resentment and anger, whether it's towards individuals or entire groups of people,
Right.
we're perpetuating that cycle of pain and separation.
It's like that quote from Nelson Mandela.
Oh, yeah.
Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies.
Powerful, isn't it?
It really is. It really highlights how holding on to anger only harms us in the end.
It does, but you know, when we're talking about large-scale conflicts where there's been so much hurt and trauma, forgiveness can feel like a really tall order.
It can feel impossible.
Absolutely, and it's not about, you know, condoning or minimizing the harm that's been done.
Right.
And it's definitely not about forgetting.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the pain, honoring the victims,
Yeah.
and then finding a way to move forward without being consumed by hatred and resentment.
It sounds like a really delicate balance.
It is, and it's a process
Yeah.
that takes time, courage, and a willingness to engage in difficult conversations.
You know, something you said earlier really stuck with me.
Yeah.
The idea that forgiveness isn't about forgetting.
Right.
Because I think sometimes people get those two concepts confused.
I think you're right. True forgiveness requires remembering. It requires acknowledging the past and learning from it so that we can create a different future.
So if we're thinking about forgiveness on a global level, what might that look like in practice? Are there any examples of communities or nations that have successfully navigated this process?
There are some inspiring examples, actually.
Oh, okay.
One that comes to mind is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa.
Oh, right.
Which was established after the end of apartheid.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
It was a way for victims of apartheid to share their stories.
Yes.
And for perpetrators to confess their crimes and seek amnesty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a long and difficult process.
Yeah.
But it played a crucial role in helping South Africa transition to a more just and equitable society.
And it wasn't just about individual forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
It was about creating a shared understanding of the past.
Right.
And acknowledging the systemic injustices that had been perpetrated.
It was about truth-telling, accountability,
Right.
and ultimately reconciliation.
That's a powerful example, but I imagine there are also many situations where true forgiveness feels impossible, where the wounds are just too deep, or where there's just like no willingness to engage in dialogue.
Absolutely. And in those cases, I think it's important to, to acknowledge the complexity of the situation.
Yeah.
And to resist the urge to offer simplistic solutions.
So it's not about forcing forgiveness,
Right.
or pretending that everything is okay.
Not at all. It's about recognizing that healing takes time and that there are different paths to reconciliation.
I think this conversation has been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's made me realize that forgiveness is not just a personal issue.
Right.
It's something that has like profound implications for how we relate to each other as individuals, as communities, and as a global society.
I agree, and I think it's a topic that deserves ongoing attention and exploration.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From those 4 simple yet powerful agreements to the concept of creating a new dream for ourselves and for the world.
It's been a truly fascinating journey.
It has, and as we wrap up, I can't help but think about all the listeners out there who are on their own personal journeys of growth and transformation.
What would you say to them as we close out our deep dive into the 4 agreements?
I'd say remember that you are not alone. We all have those old agreements that hold us back, those moments of self-doubt and fear. But we also have the power to choose differently.
We do.
We have the power to break free from those limiting beliefs and create a life that is aligned with our values and our deepest desires.
And remember to be kind to yourself along the way.
Yes. Give yourself permission to make mistakes.
Yeah.
To learn and to grow.
Absolutely.
And remember that even small steps can lead to big changes over time.
Beautifully said. And thanks to you out there for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a privilege to explore these ideas with you.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your insights and for helping us to make sense of this incredible book. And a special thank you to our listener for suggesting this deep dive. I hope you found it valuable.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode and the 4 agreements. What resonated with you? What challenges are you facing in trying to implement these agreements in your own life?
Share your insights on our website or connect with us on social media. We're always eager to hear from you.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep choosing love.
And remember, the power to create a new dream lies within each and every one of us.